Hey everyone, Coach Mike here, and welcome to another episode of the Language of Leadership podcast. I'm delighted we're here today with Jude Charles, filmmaker, entrepreneur, and leadership extraordinaire. Jude, how are you doing today?
I am doing well, Mike. Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Me as well. I know a little bit about your background as a filmmaker and entrepreneur. I'm excited for you to be able to share that with our listeners today, and then really dive into your conception of leadership and courage, your journey,
Yeah,
and all that good stuff. So I'll turn over the mic to you. Could you briefly just share with our audience here a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today?
sure. I am a filmmaker, author now, and all around entrepreneur. I started this business at 17 years old. Um, I was in a TV production classroom in high school, and the teacher, Mrs. Donnelly, uh, decided to teach me everything that she knew about video production. And then at the end of the year, my junior year in high school, May 4th, 2006, she said, Jude, you're really, really talented at video production. I think you should start a business. Well, I laughed because I'm the youngest of 10 children. My father was a construction worker. My mom worked at a chair factory, and there weren't any entrepreneurs in my family. So it was not something that was common. I didn't know what it meant to be an entrepreneur. But the following day, May 5th, 2006, Mrs. Donnelly walked into the classroom, handed me a yellow envelope. And I was like, what is this? She said, look inside. I look inside, and inside of the yellow envelope were my first set of business cards. And that's literally how I got started in video production 17 years ago. Went through an up and down journey. Like I mentioned, I didn't know anything about being an entrepreneur, so I failed my first 5 years. But over time, I learned the business of filmmaking, which is all about entrepreneurship, and have been able to. 15 years later, I'm still in business and still running a successful business and telling stories of entrepreneurs. That is what I do every single day. I create documentaries about entrepreneurs. They hire me and I tell their story. I follow them around and tell their story. And that's what I get to do each and every day. I wake up every morning and I love it.
Amazing. I can't wait to dive deeper into each part of that journey. But I
Yeah.
think we have to start back at the beginning with Miss Donnelly.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds as though this teacher was an incredible influence in your life. Can you walk us through, to the extent that you can remember, when you were a high school student, what was your conception of what a great teacher or leader or role model was? And then has that evolved since then?
Yeah. My conception at the time was a teacher that cared. Um, I think we do teachers a disservice. We don't give them enough credit as to how they help shape our lives as human beings. And what I mean by that is from about the age of maybe 5 until 18. So there's 13 years there. You spend time in school. If you're not at home for most of the day, you're at school for most of the day, right? And teachers have a major, major influence, but you have to care about what you do in order to have an influence, right? In order for a student who might be a knucklehead, right? Or a student who doesn't care about school to listen to what you are asking of them, right? Like one of the common things with kids in school is like, why do we have to do this, right? Because it's
Hmm.
like, it doesn't make sense as to why we'll use this in the future.
Hmm.
Well, if you're a caring teacher, you're able to slow down and explain why this is important to do right now. It may not be important to the big picture, but it's important for you to do it right now. And I think that hasn't changed for me because had it not been for Mrs. Donnelly, the reason that she taught me everything she knew about video production is because she every new class that she got, she would send out a survey. She would have us fill out a survey on the first day of class. And one of the questions was, do you want to do this as a career, TV production? And I answered yes. And I said I didn't know if I wanted to be in front of the camera or behind the camera because I had spent some time in front of the camera, and so as an anchor in middle school. And when she saw that on my paper, she asked me to come to her desk, and she said, "Are you really serious about this? You want to do this as a career?" I was like, "Yeah." And so that is when she just taught me everything she knew. But again, she cared, right? She cared enough to say, okay, this kid's really interested. Like, this isn't just a hobby or an elective that he's taking. He's really interested. Let me see what I can, because I learned everything. I learned how to direct. I learned how to edit. I learned how to hold a camera and film. I didn't, at that point, I hadn't really been filming a lot. Like I said, I was more of like doing this, sitting in front of the camera talking, but not knowing how to hold a camera, what to record, what angles, how to tell a story, how to bring it to life. She taught me all of that. And I think it was only because she cared. And she still cares. She's still a teacher today. It has been, yeah, 15 years since, but she is still a teacher. I think close to retirement now, though. But we still talk and communicate. But my thinking around teachers are leaders, and that hasn't changed about them being a caring person, slowing down to nurture a child in the same way that parents have to nurture children at home.
Absolutely. And I wanna just congratulate you and Miss Donnelly for keeping in touch. I
Yeah,
mean, I
yeah.
know just on a quick riff here, when I decided to leave my previous career and become a full-time speech and debate coach, I talked to my dad about it, who was an English and history teacher before, and he said to me, Mike, one of the or he probably said Michael, but said, "Hey, one of simultaneously the most beautiful and difficult moments of being a teacher is that that when on graduation day kids walk across the stage or the final day of class they walk out the classroom, you may never hear from that student again, even though you've really poured effort and your heart and soul into providing for them. And those moments when students reach back out and contact you or keep you updated on their successes, those are the moments that really make you look back and say, holy moly, I'm so happy that I made all those efforts. And I
Yeah.
remember growing up as a little kid, sometimes my dad's previous students would come by our house, right?
Hmm.
I remember
Hmm.
one particular guy, a guy named Bobby Henschel, came. He gave me Cheetos, and I thought this was like the coolest thing ever. That one of my dad's previous students was in the house and saying
Yeah.
hi. And I think that's amazing that you and Miss Donnelly are still in touch. So kudos to you two for doing that. And reminder to all those students out there: reach out to those teachers who made an impact in your life.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about that is sometimes the teachers don't know. Like Miss Donnelly knew she made an impact in my life. It is, and I wasn't the only student, right? And meaning that there were at that point she might have been teaching 10 years, and there were other students who would come by and talk about how Miss Donnelly changed their life.
Mhm.
So that was her mission. That was her mission and vision in life as a teacher, make a difference. But I think sometimes teachers don't know the difference that they make in your life, and that's why it's important to any interview that I do, I mention her by name. And because she if the interview's posted and sometimes I post it on Facebook, I always tag her in it because I don't take it for granted. I would not be here on your podcast had it not been for Mrs. Donnelly. Like, of course, she didn't get me into public speaking and things like that, but that beginning of my journey literally was because of Mrs. Donnelly. It's literally because she handed me my first set of business cards, and reaching over to show you the very first one. I keep it on my desk
Incredible.
because it's a reminder of one where I came from and where I started, but it's also like that was Mrs. Donnelly.
Wow. So Miss Donnelly, as a leader, as an influence in your life, clearly someone meaningful. Let's move then a little bit further on to, I know an important moment and period in your life was when you stepped up as a leader in your family. We talked a little bit about this off camera. And Jude, can you walk us through this important time in your life and how that changed your conception of leadership and helped you kind of find your mission?
Yeah, Mike. So it helped me find my purpose, and I have intentionally lived my life on purpose ever since. I think that um, losing my dad was not something I expected, right? Like 25 years old. But I am also grateful to know my life has purpose. Sometimes you don't figure out your purpose until later on down the road, but I figured it out early and I have intentionally lived my life through that.
That is a tremendously difficult thing for anyone to encounter, let alone as a 25-year-old guy and the youngest of 10 to lead your family through that. You mentioned, Jude, that maybe your family saw something in you, or maybe something was already there. Can you if you're willing, walk us through a little bit about what the family dynamic was at that time.
Hmm.
I mean, this is just a rare opportunity, I think, for people to be able
Hmm.
to listen and learn about, what those conversations are like when, especially, it's not really something that people broadcast and advertise all the time.
Yeah.
If you're open to it, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm the youngest of 10. I mentioned that I started the business at 17 years old. So I did go to 1 year of college, but decided not to continue college. So I'm the only one that didn't complete college. Um, the dynamics were honestly that I was the one that took a much different route than everybody else. Everyone is successful, and that's one thing I was grateful for that my dad got to see is all of his children grow up. At that point, I was 25, so still young, but we all grew up. Um, and had successful careers, right? And I think that's where everyone else was, but I was the only entrepreneur. I was the only person that took the road less traveled. And I don't know how my family exactly. Of course, I got the question of when you're going back to school. You got to do a real thing here. You have to have a backup plan. Um, but I think what was interesting to me, and I still hadn't even asked my family today, but I think what they saw in me, it was a person who had a good head on his shoulders. Yes, he didn't go to college,
Mhm,
but he also didn't just like sit around the house doing nothing. Like he's really worked hard towards his career. Um,
mhm,
and at that point, I think I had been searching. That's why I ended up at a leadership conference. I had been searching for, hey,
mhm,
where am I called to leadership? Am I called to something else? Where do I fit in this world? I think even growing up, I tried to figure out where do I fit in this family. When you're the
mhm,
youngest of 10, like there's a lot happening in the family, right? And so um I think that's what it was that was the dynamic. It was just so I'll give you one more answer to that dynamic. The brother before me,
mhm,
who is so I'm the youngest, but he's the second youngest, is we're 6 years apart. So it's not
mhm,
like necessarily like my family wanted to hang out with me like growing up. We were in different stages, but I think what they saw in me is that I still found a way to grow up, I guess, or grew up as a wise person that they would
mhm,
then entrust me to say, "Hey, yeah, let's get him to do the eulogy, or let's ask him what we should do here." And it's like I wasn't ready for it necessarily, but like I said, I also
mhm,
didn't shy away from it. It's like I got the questions. Okay, here's what I think, and then we kind
mhm,
of moved on from there. But the dynamic was just before then. It was really just Jude's the youngest. He's still growing up. He's the baby. Um, but for whatever reason, I mean, again, I think I do think about it often. It's not a conversation I've had with him, but I do think about it often.
mhm,
Why? But I also look at it as a blessing, and so I don't ask why too often either. Like I don't ask it out loud too
mhm,
often.
mhm.
Yeah.
Well, it's a brave thing to do, to lead your family through that. And while I can't say that I've had an identical experience, I do know that when my grandmother passed away, I was with my father when we got the phone call,
Hmm.
and he was the one who ended up giving the eulogy to his mother. And watching someone who I consider a hero of mine, right? My old man, my
Yeah.
pops, right?
Yeah.
Go through the struggle of trying to summarize and synthesize one person's life into a 3 to 5 minute talk. I mean, that's a gut wrenching and really challenging activity that takes a lot of bravery to put that out there.
Yeah.
Something we were talking about off camera a little bit was how the courage to deliver that eulogy and the courage to lead your family through this was something meaningful that you look back on. And I'd love for you to be able to describe that journey of courage to our listeners a little bit.
Yeah. I don't think I really understood courage until recently in 2020. So I woke up October 10th of 2020 and I could not physically get out of bed. My body had given out. Like I felt paralyzed, but I wasn't paralyzed. And it took about 2 hours to get out of bed. What ended up happening is that I was in full out burnout. The pandemic happened March 2020. I didn't take any time off. I continued working. I continued traveling. Um, and it wasn't until about June that I started to realize that I was resenting people that had been able to take time off and was home and not working.
Mhm,
Um, but October, I it happened. I went to see a therapist and was officially diagnosed with burnout and depression. And as I started to go through this journey of healing, um, one thing that came out of it is this idea of courage. It took courage to go into entrepreneurship at 17 years old, not knowing what I was doing. It took courage to decide to give my father's eulogy, stand up in front of people, a room full of people in a church to tell his story, his journey.
Mm.
It takes courage to go after each and every client. It takes courage to show up here on this podcast, to have this conversation, to be vulnerable and have these conversations that we're having today.
Mm.
I didn't understand that. I didn't understand that courage looks different for each and every person. We talk about the step forward, but sometimes it's the step back that you have to take as well. And that was something big that I had to do as I was going through burnout, is I had to take time off from work. At the time, it was just like, why would I take time off? I'm still young. I still have energy. What do you mean take time off? But it was the best decision I ever made. Now, as a caveat to that, because I do take time off every November, December. I take 2 months off to clear my head. But this was a take time off to really clear your head, to say, like, there's something wrong here, Jude. You need to slow down. You need to operate differently. You can't operate like you were at 20. I'm 33 today, but you can't operate as the way that you were at 20 years old. To me, that's how I've viewed courage, is just taking the one step forward, but also taking the one step back when you need to, and understanding that it's okay. One thing I didn't know about myself up until that point is I had tied my identity into the work that I had been doing. I had tied my identity into how I operated, not necessarily in me being who I am. Those are two different things. And it takes courage to say that out loud. It takes courage to understand when you don't have it figured out, to go get help, right? All those things take courage, and that is the journey I have been on. Literally, again, I'm 33 years old today, so I've literally been on this 33-year journey of courage, because that's the other thing I mentioned: step forward, step back. Courage is a journey. It's not a destination. And so that is now my life's mission, is to help others understand, to lead and empower them to have relentless courage. But every courage looks different for each and every person. And I just want them to embody the courage that they have, to know that the courage that they have, and embody it and feel empowered to live that every single day.
Every struggle that each of us are going through, whether visible or invisible to others, it really requires a different type of courage to attack, right?
Yeah.
I mean, to some of us, as you said, it may take a colossal amount of courage just to get up in the morning.
Yep.
and put on our socks and shoes and walk out the door.
Yeah.
If we're really not feeling ourselves right then.
Right. Yep.
For others, it might take, colossal courage to go on a sales call, or to submit that essay to the teacher, or to apply to that university that we want to go to. And it's so easy to judge other people, right? Without knowing what they're going through.
Yeah. Yeah. It is so easy.
So,
I think it's easy to judge other people without knowing their story. It's not even just what they're going through, knowing their story, because when you understand their story, it helps you see them in a different frame of mind. We talked about Bill Ackman a little bit before we got on. I had seen a documentary he was featured in. It wasn't about him, but it was about Carl Icahn. And without understanding Carl Icahn's background of how he grew up, you wouldn't understand why he was so driven in his career. For him, he lived a horrible life growing up. His parents drove him really hard. Never gave him modes of accomplishment, saying that he did really well. Like, they talked about him well when he wasn't in the room, but then when they would be with him, it's just like, oh, you could be doing better. Why aren't you doing better? Or I remember his dad said to him, both of his parents were creative entrepreneurs, and his dad said to him, your mom has a talent, I have a talent, you have no talents. What are you going to do with your life?
Ooh.
As a kid, right? But then you see him today and you understand one of the richest persons in the world, you understand how he has lived his life. There's a part in the documentary where he talks about his dad and having a relationship with his dad when he got older.
Mhm.
And I won't ruin it because I think it is a fascinating documentary to watch. But it's just, again, when you understand someone's story, it causes you to see them through a different lens. And it is easy to judge. It's easy to judge when you don't know their story. But I think if you take the time, I think it takes, as a leader, it is important that each person that you are leading or each person that you come in contact with,
Mhm.
that you understand their story. It's exactly what we did before we got on this podcast today, right? We took a little bit of time to talk to each other and figure out, okay,
Yep.
hey, this is who I am. This is who you are. This is where I'm from. This is where you're from. I told you my story of burnout before we even got on because I said I think it'll be a great conversation to have.
Mhm.
It's something to understand as a leader. We take on a lot of, as a leader who runs a company and who's also coming on to speak, we take on a lot of responsibility. I see courage as a responsibility. I see me sharing my story as a responsibility, but then we don't replenish ourselves, right? And that's part of the reasons that it leads to burnout as well. And so anyway, I think it is easy to judge, but it's important to understand the other person that you're sitting across from, the other person that you're connecting with. What is their real story? What is there? And a story is all about a very specific moment in time. So bring me into a very
Mhm.
specific moment in time, like I did with Mrs. Donnelly and May 5th, 2006, or the day that I couldn't get up out of bed, or the day that I found
Mhm.
out my father passed away. Like, bring me into a specific moment in time because it is those stories that connects us and helps us understand who we are. And that's the most important thing as human beings.
And Jude, how do you do this with your um, with your entrepreneurs that you work with? I mean, you are an expert filmmaker and an author, and this is really something that you've managed to carve out a great reputation and brand, if I can say, for yourself in.
Yeah.
How do you go about working with these entrepreneurs and these humans, these people, to
Yeah.
find out what their stories are? And then, if I could be so presumptuous as to say, then, as a young man or woman or young person today, just beginning to craft our own narratives in this ever expanding world of social media and branding and content that's already out there, what can we think about, if we were 16, 17, 18 years old today, creating our story?
Yeah. I am blessed to be able to um, work with high level CEOs who are running big companies, 7 and 8 figure companies, sometimes larger. Um, what I do, how I'm brought in is to help them craft their story. They've been an entrepreneur for at least 15, 20 years. They've lived a good life, but what they're looking to do is to reach more people. And one of the ways to reach more people is through video and is through telling their story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I come in and I do a road mapping strategy session and I help them understand the important parts of their story, the different journeys the different journey that they've been on and the different points in that journey they've been on.
Mm-hmm.
And then I literally am like a fly on the wall and I document them, maybe sometimes 3 months, sometimes 6 months, sometimes a year. I've actually been working on a documentary series now we're going on our second year filming.
Wow.
And then we bring that to life and share it. I think as young individuals today, how do you build a brand? I think you first start with the thing that you're most fascinated by right now, right? Um, I don't know. Let's say for some reason you're fascinated by the idea of, I'll just take current events. What is happening
Mm-hmm.
in Russia and Ukraine today? Let's say you're
Mm-hmm.
fascinated by politics, history. You're a history buff because that always fascinates me when I hear of teenagers who are history buffs because it's like, honestly, I just wasn't interested in history growing up. I really wasn't. I am now, but not as much growing up. But let's say you're interested in that. And at the same time that you're interested in that, you are, I don't know, you're a debate. What do you guys, is it considered an athlete, a sport? It is a sport.
Oh yeah, come on. Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a sport. So let's say you're in debate, but you're also interested in history. Like marrying those two, even talking about, I don't know, something that you really found out today that was fascinating. Bring me into that moment in time. Tell me that
Mm.
story. Or tell me the story that the day that you discovered you were really into history. Like I can tell you, the day I found out I was into video production was I was in middle school. A teacher, I was standing outside with my friends. We were waiting for school to start. Teacher flung open the door and he was like, "Who wants to do the morning announcements this morning?" And I said, "I'll do it." I had never done it before, but
Hand just shot up.
I'll give it a shot. But someone that was sick, they didn't show up. He was in his last couple of seconds before school started, and he needed someone to do it. And I was like, "I'll do it." What could I lose by trying something out that I've never done before? But literally, I saw the equipment. This was at the time that I was in front of the camera, but I saw the equipment. I saw the people, like, and it just seemed like such a fascinating thing to me. I went on to do the morning announcements for 2 years after that, but never got to play with the equipment.
Mm.
And so it was always in my mind, like, would it be really cool to because I love technology. Even to this day, I love technology. But I always had it in my mind until I got to high school and TV production classes. But again, that's how I think you start to document your story now. The benefit that kids have today that I didn't have is video cameras. You have a video camera in your hand with your cell phone.
All the
And I think
time.
when you start to document that, and you have the distribution platforms of YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I think now that you have these platforms where you could share and you can get feedback and you can rehearse your story, because that's the other thing. It's not just, you don't get your story perfect the first time you tell it. I've been at this point on over 60 different podcasts, and so I've gotten time to perfect some of the stories that I share. Sometimes I don't always share every story, but you get time to do that. And so I think it is one thing I have is what I call a story bank. It's a book where literally stories are happening every single day. I literally have a notebook where I write down the stories, whether it happened to me or it happened to someone else that I'm inspired by their story. I write it down because that gives me an opportunity to share. But that's all a part of my personal brand. I don't share the Carl Icahn story because I just thought it was a cool story. Like I had this similar, I didn't have my dad tell me that I wasn't talented, but I had a similar journey with a relationship with my dad where our relationship got better as I got older, not when I was younger. Right. And so, again, this all becomes a part of our personal brand. Who are you? What do you stand for? What are you about? And then maybe over time, what changes? Right. Like I wasn't interested in history growing up, but I am now. Why? Tell me that story. Tell me what changed. I think as young people, that is what you pay attention to is who am I? And you don't have to have it figured out, but who are you today? What are you interested in today?
I think that's so critical to just be open to say, I don't have to have it perfect the first time around, but where I am today, that's where I start. Start what you have, or start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. Something like this to roughly paraphrase Arthur Ashe.
Yeah.
And I
But
think
even you, Michael, you shared your story before we got on, right? Like you shared your journey of like being in finance, not feeling fulfilled in helping kids in debate in English. And it's like, I understand him a little better, right? Like I understand he's a person that isn't just about making a ton of money, right? There's inferences. The reason I'm saying that is there's inferences that you make. When we talk about judgment, you talked about judgment a little bit earlier. When we talk about that, there's inferences that you make, but that changes based on how you understand that person's story, that person's journey. I think again, the advantage that young people have today is actually, I'm gonna give you this perfect example. If I was a kid today, let's say I don't want to build a personal brand, but let's say I want to get a really good job. Let's say I want to work with hypothetically Elon Musk.
sounds great. Let's do this.
Right? I would be documenting my life today. Let's say I'm only 14 years old, but by the time I turn 21, I know I'm going to be working with Elon Musk. I would be documenting my life today for that purpose, so that later on, when I'm submitting my resume, I don't just submit a paper. I submit a video. Because let's say I'm into spaceships, I'm into rockets, and I'm showing videos of me building rockets when I was a kid, and I'm showing videos of me testing different things out, different theories, calculations. That is going to stand out much more than a person that just submits a paper. or even a person
Absolutely.
that goes into the room. You can have that video sent to the HR person or the person that's going to hire you before you ever get into the room, and now they feel like they know you.
Mm.
Now you have an upper hand. I didn't have that advantage growing up, but it's an advantage I would definitely take on now today. If I know there is a place I'd want to work and I want to make it happen, I'm making a video. There's no way I'm not making a video about it today. And I do that even in the clients that I pitch today. Before I ever get into the meeting with them, I'm sending them a video of who I am, what I do. Sometimes I'll create a custom video. But I think that is the advantage as a young person today. Even if let's say you're listening to this and you don't want to build a personal brand, you want to stand out with the job that you want to get hired for. You want to stand out for the projects that you want to go after. You do that by documenting and telling your story.
Yep.
And you could have fun with it. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect today, but you keep tweaking it. You keep having fun. And now when you walk into the room, they see you as a different person. Now you are a leader because you've taken the initiative. You had vision. You brought the vision to life. I want someone like that working for me. It doesn't matter what it is that I do. It doesn't have to be Elon Musk. It doesn't have to be Carl Icahn. It could be anything. But now you stand out, and now you are much more valuable to the person, to the CEO, to whoever is hiring you. You're much more valuable.
That is such an amazing life hack, career hack right there. I hope everyone who is listening was just furiously scribbling notes down and immediately opening iMovie or Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere or whatever it is, whipping out their camera and starting to videotape and document themselves at that moment.
Yeah.
With that, it does take a degree of patience in order to be able to execute on something like this. And frankly, I think it goes back to the idea of courage, of being able to not being recognized immediately or to not have immediate feedback loops. And I think in today's day and age, we're so used to these immediate feedback loops, whether it be through, YouTube and TikTok, we get those likes and thumbs ups right away, or even whether it be through careers and life development, right? The literature, as far as I can see, is quite robust to the point where young professionals today expect promotions faster, expect pay raises faster. Not saying that that's inherently a bad thing, but just this expectation of immediate feedback has kind of been ratcheted up. And I'm curious as to how you view that as a leader yourself, and also working with your clients, as to what role does patience or long-term thinking play in that process?
I think that patience is incredibly important because nothing happens overnight. I mentioned earlier that when I got started in business, I failed my first 5 years in business. I could not make consistent money. And what ended up happening is that I woke up one morning about 7 a.m. in the morning, and it was always a nightmare for me to hear these chains hitting the floor, and I heard the chains hitting the floor that morning. I got up out of bed, ran to the front window, and what it was a tow truck driver coming to repossess my car for the second time in 8 months. I go back in my room, I sit on the edge of my bed, and in that moment, maybe about 30 minutes, I'd been sitting there, 40 minutes, and I get a phone call from a client I had been working with. Her name is Keisha Dior. In Keisha Dior, at the time, we were doing a documentary of her building her business from the ground up. Her business was cosmetic. So she was selling blue lipstick, purple lipstick. This is about 2010. And for one reason or another, I decided to pick up the phone, and she's excited on the other end. And then she's like, Jude, you won't believe it. You won't believe it. And I'm like, what happened, Keisha? She said, I just got off the phone with my accountant. He just told me we made $1 million. We crossed over the 7-figure mark. For context, I had only made $3,000 on that project. I had been an entrepreneur for 5 years struggling to make money, and Keisha was able to make $1 million in 1 year. Why that's important to the context of patience is that in that moment, I realized there was 2 options. I could either really quit in that moment, or I could view this as an open door that, hey, you really got something valuable here. There's just a piece missing.
Mm,
And at the time, the piece was business. And so that is what the route that I decided to go, is I didn't really understand business. I understood my talent,
mm,
but I didn't understand business. And it took that moment for me to understand I had something valuable that people will pay for. She had given me her hard-earned money, but I needed to understand how to do it in a better way. But that took patience, because now I had to take a whole year off to learn
mm,
business. And the following client that I did end up pitching, I pitched him for a project $15,000 and got the project.
mm,
But that requires patience. Everything that you want in life does not happen overnight. This interview did not happen overnight, right? And it takes patience, it takes courage too, to realize like, hey, I want something in life, whether it is I want to fulfill my mission, I want to end world hunger, I want to help children with debate and understand how to speak,
mm.
do public speaking, or even like the analogy that I gave earlier, the hypothetical with I want to work with Elon Musk. I said that if you're 14, it wouldn't happen till you're 21. That's 7 years you have to be patient. Patience is required in anything that you do. If a baby is being born, it requires 9 months of patience. Sometimes a little bit less, but usually about 9 months of patience, right? But you're preparing in that time. You're not just sitting there waiting for the baby to come. You're preparing. You are buying products for the baby. You are buying diapers and wipes, and you're buying a
Mhm,
crib, and you're doing all this stuff in between. When I mentioned you want to work with Elon Musk from 14 to 21, what did I say? Prepare, document, try out certain
mhm.
things. What is it that you really do? You want to be an engineer? Do you want to, I don't know, work in the PR department? Do you like, what is it? Prepare right now. Keep working at your craft. There is no way to avoid time that it takes for something to get off the ground. Even if you are starting your own business, it takes time.
Yeah.
And that requires patience. And so I think that is incredibly important. It's interesting. I talk about Elon Musk. I watched a video of him. I forget what year it was, but there was the year that he was just starting SpaceX. The people that he admired, um, the people that were astronauts that he admired, went in front of Congress and they said, "We do not think SpaceX should exist for the reason of sending everyday people to space." That was Elon Musk's whole mission,
Wow.
right? And can you imagine the people that inspired you to even get in the industry are saying you shouldn't be doing this? And there's an interview. I think it was CBS that did an interview with him, and they asked him about it, and it was like, "How do you feel? These are your heroes who you looked up to." He's like, "It hurts," and you could see him. He's moved to tears. He's like, "It hurts.
Mm.
It hurts, but I will never ever give up." He was like, "I'd have to be dead to give up." And years later, he hadn't even fulfilled. I don't think he'd even built a successful rocket at that point, but maybe a decade later, in first company to send people into space,
It's incredible.
and normal everyday people,
Incredible
right?
conviction and incredible patience. Yeah.
Patience is what it takes. And I think the ones who have succeeded, the ones that we talk about today who have succeeded, had patience. Without it, you cannot. I don't. Again, it's not about starting a business. It's not about just even um, having a job. It is everyday life. As
Mm.
a leader, it requires patience because everything is not going to go the way you have it envisioned in your head. It requires patience. It requires patience. Let's just bring it full circle. We've had technical difficulties on today's podcast,
Sure have.
but it requires patience. We're still both laughing. We're still both here, right? Like it requires that patience every single day to get through and to make it to the destination that you have in your mind.
I feel like that's a great way for us to lead into the final segment of the chat today, which is
Yes.
looking forward. What's something, Jude, that you're really excited about over the course of the next period of time? Something that you're working on that you're really pumped up and jazzed up about, and where can we go to find out more about your work?
Yeah, so there's a few things I'm really excited about. One, I recently launched a book called Dramatic Demonstration. It is my life's work in storytelling. I walk through 3 different projects that I've done, but it also helps others understand how to tell their story and bring their stories to
Mhm.
life. So I'm really excited about that because it is the first of 3 books I am writing. It will be a series, a trilogy. Um, and the second thing that I'm most excited about is book number 2, which will be all about dramatic leverage. I haven't even started writing it yet, but we talked offline a little bit about the next entrepreneurial journey that I'll be going on, which is leveraged
Mhm.
buyouts. In simple terms, being able to purchase other companies without my own money. Um, and I'm excited about that because I've been doing one thing for the last 15 years. I do it, plan to retire from video production entirely in the next 5 years. So that means I will have been doing one thing for 20 years. And I'm excited about what the next part of my journey looks like. Having fun.
Mhm.
I burnt out. I talked about that, but I'm looking at how do I rebuild in order to have fun, in order to help others understand that there's different ways to do things, including leverage buyouts. The reason I call it dramatic leverage, the book, and it will document the journey of me going through
Mhm.
this. The reason that I call it dramatic leverage is because I think there's 3 different phases in entrepreneurship, which is one is capital leverage. So that's all about just making money,
Mhm.
right? We go after the next client or the next customer. Then there's lateral leverage, which is what I'm doing right now today. I've written a book, I'm speaking on podcasts, I speak on stages, I do workshops. That's lateral leverage. I've taken the things that I've been good at and now I'm transferring it into another format, but it's still the same thing. I'm still talking about the same thing, storytelling, leadership, different things like
Mhm.
that. Leverage buyouts, I shouldn't be involved in leverage buyouts, right? It's almost like it's impossible. How does a guy go from video production to leverage buyouts to buying out other companies to being a serial entrepreneur almost? How does that happen? Well, it's something I'm interested in. And I'm going to document the journey. I'm going to see what happens. I may not get it right. I may not even end up doing it full time. I don't know. We'll see. But that's the next phase that I'm excited about is I'm just having fun, right? I'm just having fun. And that's what I'm excited about is um, just having fun. I call it the phase 2 of my life, but literally I've had a lot of fun. I've been blessed with the career that I had in the first phase, and now the second phase is just all about enjoying life. I have this bucket list called the Adventures of Hey Jude. I've done some things on the list, but honestly, I think I forget now. There might be over 100 different things on the list now, but maybe I've done about 10 to 15. I want to accomplish at least the next 50 within the next 10 years, and that's what I'm excited about. It's just having fun. Um,
I love it.
and so that's what's next for me.
I
Yeah.
love it. And Jude, you're just such a in like I don't know what the word is, but you're a guy who's living with integrity, right? You're
Oh
saying that
yeah.
like these are my values. When I talk about courage,
Yep.
I'm willing to go
Hmm.
out and blaze my own trail, and you have been doing it, and you're still doing it. You talk about patience, and
Yeah.
you say, "Yep, for the next 5 years, this is the time I'm going to give myself to get to my next adventure." It's not something to say I'm doing it right now, like I'm going to do it by next month. And it's clear. It's clear to me, and I know to all of our listeners that the success that you've had is there for a reason, and all the successes that you will have is there
Thank
for a
you.
reason as well. So
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Again, if there's nothing else I leave behind, if you didn't pay attention to the last, I don't know, 40 minutes that we were talking, courage looks different for each and every person. Just because one person did something that you might be afraid to do, don't mean that's the thing for you to
mm,
do. Courage looks different for each and every person. All you have to pay attention to is what's the next step forward. Take that next step. And if you take the next step, you'll be much closer to your dreams. Don't stand still. Don't just keep taking steps back. Do the thing that scares you, even a little bit. If it scares you a little bit, just try it out. Did you die? You didn't. Keep going. And so that's the one thing I want to leave with is courage. Take the next step. Don't think about 20 years from now. Don't think about 10 years from. Just take the next step. What do you have to do in the next hour? What do you have to do in the next 10 minutes
make it happen.
to make sure to get you closer to your dreams?
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, we've been here with Jude Charles, filmmaker, entrepreneur, author, and soon to be the king of leverage. Jude, thanks so much for your time, man. It's really great to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me, Mike. It was definitely a pleasure. Thank you for your patience too on this episode as
Thank you for
well.
your
Thank you.
courage. I'll chat to you soon, mate. See ya.